we go out to London and we record there, and it was just amazing. We recorded with the string section of the London Symphony. It was just an amazing experience, and I'm there watching her doing what she does. And I say to her later, "Why Bull Street? We're from two totally different countries." And she says to me, "I lost land, my family in the countryside of England, and also I was very close with my grandmother, and that's why I did it."
Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. In this episode, a woman faces the battle of her life when her estranged father's family tries to evict her, in director Lynn Dow's drama, Bull Street. The film tells the story of LouEster, a small-town personal injury lawyer who was raised by her grandmother after her mother died in childbirth. When an entitled Ivy League lawyer questions the ownership of their home and its surrounding land, the stage is set for a clash of privilege against family. Bull Street is Dow's feature directorial debut. Following a screening of the film at the DGA Theater in New York, Dow spoke with director Sarah Pirozek about filming Bull Street. Listen on for their spoiler-filled conversation.
Hi, everyone. Thank you guys for coming out. And Lynn, what a lovely, beautiful film. Thank you for sharing that with us. I was really moved by it. God, family secrets, right? We all have some, or can relate to them at least. We've heard stories, we've heard lore. One thing I really loved, apart from the pacing of your film, because I felt like I was in good hands as soon as the film started. And this is the first time Lynn and I have met, so it's really nice to be able to learn about your movie. The pacing was amazing, but that sense of place was so incredible. Can you talk about like the location you used? Was it a real place? Because look, the location is like almost a character in itself, I felt like. I don't know if you guys did, but...
Yeah, it was actually a character in the movie. That's Somerton, South Carolina. And Somerton, South Carolina is where my maternal family was born. That's their hometown. My grandmother was born there and all. And I actually spent, Sarah, time in Somerton with my grandmother. Everyone had already moved up to New York except her sister. And so my grandmother would take me down south and take me down to Somerton. And, everything that you see in the movie is what's there in the film. That's how I saw it growing up. I wrote what I saw, and it was just incredible. Just, going down and tracing my family's steps and going to places where, my grandma's gone, my mom's gone. It's interesting now, production office was where the high school that still exists now, the historic high school where my mom met my dad. And so you walk through those halls trying to figure out, okay, where did they meet? Did they meet here? Did my mom sit here? And I would call her in New York and say, where did you sit in the science classes? And so that was just a really great experience. But it was so much of my family history in South Carolina, in that particular town. And I think it's important for me to say that's the same county that gave us Briggs versus Elliott, which is the first of 5 cases that kicked off Brown versus Board. And it's also the same county where 14-year-old George Stinney, the youngest in America to be executed. And so here we have Bull Street. And so it's amazing when I went into the town to, say, I'm going to make a movie. First of all, they were like, what? Because there was a major article in the newspaper that said nothing good ever happens in Somerton. And so, but Hollywood is coming to Somerton. And so they, the town and everyone just rallied, around the movie, and they do not forget about the Briggs versus Elliott case. And they did forget about the George Stinney. They have plaques all over, and every probably quarter they honor, those, but they felt really special about Bull Street and something positive was happening. And so everyone from across, whites, blacks, Republicans, Democrats, they all came together to make this movie. And I really could not make it without the town, being that extra crew member, so to speak.
I know I was very struck by the amount of extras you had. And I understand this is not a huge budget movie. So, extras cost a lot, background and wrangling background. So I was assuming you had a lot of love in that town.
Tons of love and, family still there, but and everyone owns you. Everyone's family. I knew your great grandmother. It's funny because the name Miss Big Gal is actually the name of my great grandmother. And so I just gave it to my grandmother and, but that's the name and everyone in the town knew her. And so they thought it was a story about her. So that's why I changed the name to Puckney also. They thought, oh, Miss Big Gal, there's a story about her. And it was just so wonderful going through the town. I knew your grandma, all these stories and everybody had, just welcomed it.
And the amount of support that you receive when you're shooting. One of the reasons I think I'm doing this Q&A with you is I wrote, directed, and produced my feature. So I get the love, I get the lift, everything that you had to put together, and having a supportive kind of background to your film is so valuable, isn't it? Yes. It's great. No question there. I'm just saying that. I really wanted to talk also about the casting because, of course, Loretta Devine, Miss Big Gal, amazing, amazing actor. Amy Madigan, amazing, also holds her own. Melinda Hale, stunning. But, even Dion Smith, he was on screen for such a short space of time. And I love that your editor or you chose to put him in the first few moments of the film. Can you talk about your casting process, and then we'll talk a little bit more about your editing?
Sure. I knew, let's start with Melinda Hale first.
Okay.
I knew exactly, she plays Lynn. That's who I am. And I knew exactly what I wanted in that character. And so I actually went through, and I had some actresses come and they were all just wonderful. And there were many that said, hey, look, wait a second, COVID, we were just coming back from the pandemic. And so everybody had other projects. Fortunately, it was great there. And I said, I know what I want in Melinda and LouEster's character. And so I actually went through backstage. And I started just going through, and there were just tons, and just going through the process. I came across Melinda, and I saw her video. I saw one video she still had up there, and it was an old video she had done early in her career. And I knew right then and there, it when you see it. Right. I said, that's my LouEster. Yes. And I get in touch with her agent, and I personally called, and we get her the script, and she comes and she does a tape audition, and I see it, and I knew right then and there. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, everybody, that's it. She's my LouEster.
She brought so much emotion. She had a real depth to her character. It was wonderful to see her work. And, who is it? I think Elia Kazan said, directing's in the casting. If you cast the right people, it makes your job easy, right? Yes. Or easier.
And I'll go to Amy after this, Amy Madigan. So we got this casting director, and I would have to say, I wrote it for another actress, an A-list actress I had in mind, and I really wanted her to play this. She got the script, and she says, I love this script, but I don't want to work with a first-time director. And I understood that. She had a journey there. She had a body of work, and she had a right to say that and feel that way. And I said, okay, well, there's something great. And I started going through the casting director. She sends me over a list, extraordinary actresses. And I remember seeing The Field of Dreams. Mm-hmm. And I remember loving her in that character. And I said, no, she would not. No way. And so I said, I like Amy Madigan, but I don't think she'll say yes to it. And she says, well, let's just see. But I think I need to say this first about the casting director. One of the things, because I'm new at this, and I knew I would be going into it as a deer in headlights, I wanted to surround myself by wisdom. and those
very smart.
and those who had done it before. So when I would run into those problems, I knew. And it's an indication also of me hanging with my grandmother. That's where you get a lot of the, the dialogue and things in there. And so I said, Amy would never say, yeah, she gets the script and she says, I'm in. And I've got to say this and shout this out. I get a call and I'm talking to Amy on the phone, and I didn't realize that she was married to Ed Harris. And he says, "Give me that phone. I want to know who gets because Amy, I think she was going to slow down with the acting. And he says, I want to know who's getting my wife out of, this fabulous script and getting my wife out of retirement." And I'm like, Ed Harris is on it. What? And everything was just so real at this moment, but I was really, really great. And she says, I want to do it. I'm in. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think your energy, and you have a real vibe, power about you, and positivity about you, and that's a big part of being, I think, in production in general. If you can inspire, you're a leader as a director. You have to be a leader, and you have to inspire. So, some people inspire with a kind of tough love, and some people are very all embracing. And I'm sure the enthusiasm that you create in people is really valuable on set. But now we have to talk about Loretta.
Whew. I tell you, I'll have to say this first. So again, the casting director says, I had a list, and there are not that many African-American actresses that age. And so there were few to pick from. And again, you're just like, no, this is Hollywood royalty. How dare you, your first feature film, say, I want Loretta Devine. I want Amy Madigan. And so I said to the casting director, Loretta Devine? And just like this little voice, Loretta Devine? Because I didn't want her to say, okay, Lynn, don't get this big head. And so she says, yeah, sure.
Oh, who was your casting director?
Fern Cassell.
Okay. And
she had done a lot of work. She's been in the business a very long time. And so I knew she would have the relationship with those actors of, with that age. And so she gets her, and Loretta says, I'm in. She says, I'm in, and we get to talking, and it's interesting and she says to me in her Loretta voice, she says, Lynn, I'm going to tell you something. Because at first I'm intimidated.
Sure. Of course.
She comes on, and, I'm intimidated, and she says, I'm going to tell you something, Lynn. If you're not going to direct me, you're going to think about all the other movies I've done. I'm leaving this set. No, don't leave. And she says, I need you to direct me. We are here.
So she got you to step in and step up. Yeah. And don't be shy.
Because I was intimidated. Mm-hmm. I was shy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how do you direct Loretta Devine?
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that your first time out? And so I was really intimidated, and she calmed the nerves, and they were great that way. Mm-hmm. They were really great, but they allowed me to direct them. And, I like to say that Amy Madigan is from the Baptist church, because we were having one of these days, anything that could go wrong went wrong. So she calls me into the trailer, and I'm thinking, she's going to tell me about the industry, what happens. It happens every day, but she starts praying. Oh. And it was just, and I'm sitting there, and she's praying, and she's praying. I was like, she's reminding me of the church that I attend. And she's praying, and she doesn't let up. And I'm like, oh, wait a second. Isn't time money in this business? And she goes on, and she finishes, and she says, now go out there and let's finish this movie. And I was just like, yes. So I was comforted that way, and just getting all the support. I mean, the characters from top to bottom, all the actors in there were just simply amazing. We actually have Madeline McCrae, who plays Azelle. Madeline,
I was about to shout you out.
Yes.
You were amazing in it.
Yes.
You were amazing in it. And I didn't even know, how you did the casting, if there were friends of yours you'd worked with before, or, so that's great. It's really wonderful. How did you guys meet? Through the casting agent?
No. I actually saw him backstage also. I knew what I wanted in a friend, and I called her up, and she was going through some things. I get her the script, but she tells the story much more than I do. And I get her the script, and she was going through some things also, and saw the script and says, I'm in. And she came in and did a magnificent job as the friend, The
As a
cousin there.
director, I've found when I don't know if you can agree, but I feel like when you're doing a read through or you're in the room with someone, you know almost immediately if this is your person or not. It's not, you have to, sometimes you have to do a callback to get chemistry with someone, or, I used to direct a lot of commercials. So sometimes you had to get the look right for the agency, but usually just when you're doing something dramatic, you're in the room with the person and there's something electric about their energy. Don't you agree?
Yes. I knew it. I knew every single when I got on the phone with Loretta, when I got on the phone with Amy, you knew it right there. There were no Madeline. There was no question about it with each of these characters that was it. And they just helped to really carry it. And I'm really appreciative of that.
Well, I think that when you're a director who's also the writer of the movie, I think there's a level of trust that you imbue with everyone who's working with you, because you know the script so well. And for you particularly, because you're writing about something that you had experienced. I mean, they say write what you know. Well, you were, I'm Miss Cliche today, sorry, but it's very true. You wrote what you knew, and then you're talking to people about something. It's not like, oh, wait, what's on page 95? What are you supposed to be feeling? You can tell them immediately, I know exactly where you've come from and where you're going. And that's, I think, very helpful for actors.
Well, I'll tell you, it's a fine line, but I think what helped me was that I wrote this story, Sarah, because I was broken. I'd lost my grandmother. I mean, we were extremely close. And I must say that she was not a mother to me, because I have a mother and I was raised by my mother, but it was just that different relationship. The discipline was different. When I had to do chores, a mother says it one way and a grandma makes it this whole fun, creative production. And so we were extremely close. I was the only family member scheduled to speak at her service, but grief had paralyzed me, overwhelmed me so much that I could not move. I could not get out. I could hear the minister calling my name to get up to speak, but I was stuck. I was so paralyzed there with her death and so I walked out of there just completely broken and not telling, family members and friends to live life with dignity and have compassion and empathy. And so I went through life just broken, smiling on the inside. And it was really rough for me dealing with my grandma's death. You never know death until it actually hits you. It's upon you.
Yes, I've experienced it. I hear you.
Yes. And it just overwhelmed me, and you still have to show up and, you go talk to the counseling, you go talk to this, but I've got to say that it was my grandmother who actually helped me out of it. I'll go back to probably when I was about 5 years old. My uncle, my grandmother's first child, he actually had, his wife left and he had a nervous breakdown, and they wanted to institutionalize him and give him medication. But I think my grandmother was before her time. She says that, no, you don't medicate a broken heart. So we'll just surround and love him. And he had to come live in my house, and I had to give up my room to him. And if what seemed like a lifetime that he was in this room, I would bang on the door and he just wouldn't open it, but it would seem like a lifetime that he was in this room. My family tells me he was in there about 3 or 4 months. And when he finally opens the door, there are like these stacks of papers there. And I look at the paper and it says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and earth. 2 weeks prior, I'd done that same scripture in Sunday school. We had a Sunday school play. And so I had done that same exact scripture. So I look up at my uncle and say, you wrote the Bible. And he's like, no, Lynn, no, I did not. You don't know the difference between a 5-year-old's copy and written. So he says, no. I go to church. I go to school. I go every place trying to convince everybody that my uncle wrote the Bible. And so my grandmother, to stop me, I could still just hear this day, I'm in the bed with her and she's like, Lynn, but you're gifted. You're a better writer than he is. You're so much better. And I'm like, really? She says, yes, just write, Lynn, write. And she's convincing me. And I started writing. So fast forward at her death, when I could hear her trying to get me out of it, because I think the universe sends us messages. And so I could hear her say, Lynn, write. I was working on another script that I really thought was my baby, but I couldn't move with that. And it wasn't writer's block at all. It was just that grief that had, overwhelmed me. And so she was just like, I could hear her telling me, write, Lynn, write. So I could hear it. And I said, okay, I'll finally write the eulogy and I'll do a 2-hour eulogy this time. And the world will hear. And then I was like, nobody wants to hear a 2-hour eulogy. You're a pain, Lynn. And so my grandmother, when she would take me down south, she would always say, first of all, I was the only family member from New York to go down there. I fell in love with the Piggly Wiggly down there. We don't have that in New York.
I loved in the credits that you thanked Piggly Wiggly. Yes.
Yes, the Piggly Wiggly market. And so I would go down. So we would go down there and I would stomp on like these ant heels. And my great aunt would say, there's this thing down there. My great aunt would say, Lynn, stop it. I'm going to take you to Bull Street. I thought Bull Street was the Central Park Zoo because I'd spent so much time there with my grandmother. And so I wanted to go to Bull Street, Sarah. I wanted to go to Bull Street. Little did I know I'd be going this way. But my grandmother, when she said, so I thought I'll do her story and I'll write it and I'll get that finally get that eulogy out here and I'll make this movie. And so I had to trace her steps. I said, I will take her back home because we would go down there. She would love to sit on the porch. And she says, when all of it's over in New York, I'm going to come back down here and sit on the porch with my legs crossed at the ankles and drink sweet iced tea. It had to be sweet. And so I thought I'll take her back home. And so I had to trace her steps, and tracing her steps, I find out that it's her my great grandmother, which would be her grandmother, who died on Bull Street, 1958. And she was fighting back then when the prisons were overcrowded. They would send, folks to Bull Street. And so she had
Bull Street really was,
Bull Street is a name, very infamous name. It's a street name in Columbia, South Carolina, one of their main street names. And it housed what they called back then, when it opened, the Lunatic Insane Asylum. Mm-hmm. And that was the state hospital. Mm-hmm. And so everyone in South Carolina had a connection to it. And so my great grandmother was fighting with the sheriff, and they carted her off to Bull Street. And when she was committed, she lost all her land. And that's when I found it. That's when I knew I had my story.
That's an incredible story.
That's when I knew I had the story.
So did you go through any of this, the heirs, inheritance thing? Is this a true story or
yes
approximate?
So we try to go through it, but when you call Bull Street up there, the records were burned in the fire, we do not have it, you've got to probate it, and it's all his property. You've got to find all of these cousins all over and try to make it happen and get this land. But we're talking about the loss of generational wealth at this moment.
Absolutely.
And so that's what happened, and that's when the story really came. And I saw it. I was like, that's it. And you just bring so much of you, because that's what we do as filmmakers, right?
Absolutely.
We heal. We take them on this journey. We wipe away a tear. We make them laugh. And I think it's our responsibility to do it. But this movie, Bull Street, I really healed during this moment. This was where I could hear my grandmother saying, it's okay. And just keep going, Lynn, get yourself up. I never wanted to disappoint her in life. And so that helped me to just get up and to put that one foot in front of the other and keep going.
Well, I think she's probably here with us right now and having a good time watching you. Talk about it with me. Oh, yeah, I'm sure she's very proud. The other stuff I wanted to talk about was very much like the enthusiasm that you bring to your project it's so impressive that you brought some really great collaborators too. I was really impressed with the score, the musical score, and Dudley. And then I noticed that a Roger Dudley did the mix. So they are a team, a couple?
They're married, Roger. And I'll tell you about that. So I have... Bob Dylan was in one of my short films.
Himself or his music?
His music.
Right, because I noticed also your needle drops were very impressive. You have a Bob Dylan needle drop.
Well, I've got to say this quickly with Bob Dylan. So in my short film, Compassionate Release, my grandmother, who had been to the Madison Square Garden review, was just like, Bob Dylan, use that song for Compassionate Release. That's my short film. And I was just like, nobody's going to, but anyway, you can't find Bob Dylan. You're not going to find him IMDb. You're not going to find him any place. And so I Googled the Google until I found a personal attorney who was making this statement. So I call him up and he goes, and I knew it was him because he's, hello? Now the secretary was away from her desk or something, but he answers and I just start talking really quickly. I have this short film, Bob Dylan, please. He goes, that'll break your bank. And he says, no, Bob Dylan's. I said, look, sir, please just give me your email address, because I knew if he had given me that email address, He was going to say, let me see what this crazy person is talking about, what script she has for Bob Dylan. He gives me the email address. I said, you give it to me. I'm not going to call you back. I don't care what you do with the script. Burn it. I don't care. 3 days later, I get a call from Jeff Rosen, Bob Dylan's manager, and says, today's your lucky day. We don't even know if you're shooting this movie or not. You're giving us the script, but Bob loves the script. I'm like, put Bob on the phone. But he was just so wonderful. He says, Bob loves the script. I actually got a chance to meet him, but that's another story. And so when we came with the the Bull Street here, I said, there's only one. I've got to go back to Bob Dylan. And so we used the Moonshiner in here, and I did not have anybody to score it. I was going to, call up some folks here. And I called Jeff Rosen back and I said, hey, look, this Shakespearean of the music business, does he compose also? And he's like, no, Bob doesn't compose, Lynn, and he says, I tell you what, there's Ann Dudley. And I'm like, Ann Dudley, where she is? I'm telling you, she'll be amazing for this. And Ann Dudley had done the Full Monty and the Crying Game. And so I said, is
she English?
Yes. And so we get in touch with her manager, and the manager says, I send over the script. I send over the script. He calls me back and he says, oh, Ann would like you to have her home number, her cell phone number. I'm like, we don't do that. Do I have to go through you? He goes, oh, no. We're pretty comfortable here. Call her up. I called her up and we went through the script. And she went through it every scene. What were you feeling?
That's fantastic. The themes, I noticed the reoccurring themes in it were great.
And we go out to London and we record there, and it was just amazing. We recorded with the string section of the London Symphony. It was just an amazing experience, and I'm there watching her doing what she does. And I say to her later, "Why Bull Street? We're from two totally different countries." And she says to me, I lost land, my family in the countryside of England. And also I was very close with my grandmother. And that's why I did it. And
stories that are universal.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
the most important thing.
Exactly. And that's what she wanted. She says, I'm in. And I said, I can't really pay you, but, and she says, I'm in.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So she ended up doing some pro bono work on it.
She ended up doing some pro bono work on it.
That's incredible. Yeah. Good for you.
She really did. And it really resonated with her. We're actually going to do a Q&A in London with her. So we're heading out there December 7th, but just an amazing, everyone across the board, and you're just amazing.
Well, I'm so happy for you. And I think you have a lot of good light shining down on the project. The other thing about this is now more and more directors, because we're in the Directors Guild talking about how you work as a director, you have to develop your own projects more and more. Everything's closing down a lot. And so you produced this. Can you talk about how you put together the project as a producer?
Yeah, and my producing partner, Whitney Tannick, she was there. She's from Bermuda, out of Bermuda, and so she was really there. But I think what guided me throughout this entire process was the idea to set myself free with my grandmother's coming to terms and grips with that great loss. And so that kept me focused and what I want. And I was intentional in what I wanted in this film. But as a producer, you must know when to change hats, because there were times, even as the writer, I had to keep Lynn, the writer, out of the directing room, keep the director out of the script, and do all of that. But as a producer, putting all of this together and rallying everyone, but the script actually helped me out because everyone was feeling it. We were all going through something during that COVID, coming out of COVID. And I didn't realize that so many people like myself was broken. So when you went to people, yes, I'm in. After reading the script, yes, I'm in. Yes, I'm in. And so I must say also, we have an attorney here who did the production attorney, Willard Standback. He's actually there. But so many people the decisions you have to make as a producer and putting everything together and making the right decision and who's going to do this and who's going to follow you. But the important thing as the producer, being the writer, director, you must know when to take off that hat and put on that producer's hat. And that's what I had to do.
I know we just have a couple more minutes, but I would love to hear one example where you had to take off your director's hat and put on your producer's hat, or vice versa.
I would say, I must talk about the gnats and the bugs that just like overcame us here. So as a director, we were just like on the set, and Madeline will tell you all these bugs and gnats were all over the place. And you could see Loretta and her, they're all in the porch, just swatting them away and things. And they were really there. And so we were in the scene in the woods. And I'm there with Gary Ray Moore, who's really, really great as Mayor Bucky. Mm-hmm. And it's all over him, and it's all on the PA that's supposed to be wiping him down, the makeup department. They're supposed to be wiping him down and doing all of this. I had to make the decision. The makeup department, they were all covered. And they were fighting and boxing and slapping away these bugs. And they had come from up north, so they weren't used to it. And so it was a problem. So I as a producer, I said, go back to the production office. I'll do it. And everybody's looking at me like, what? But at that moment, I knew that to protect them also and to keep the film going, I had to be the one to wipe down and dap Gary Ray Moore's character. And that's what I did. And we made it work. And so those are the type of things that you want to do, when to make that decision, when to say, let me give these guys a break. Let me save the day. And it was fine. I was already directing him and close up on him. It didn't take me anything to take something and just dap him. I knew how to apply makeup and I knew how to do that. And so it did not take me anything. And so I just left myself as a director and decided that I was going to call that shot and send everybody back to the production office.
Yeah, sometimes you have to know when to fight your battles, choose which battles you want to fight. Absolutely. Yes. Well, I think you've won the war here. Again, my final cliche, but I think, being a director is no easy feat, and you've put so much love on the screen. So thank you so much, Lynn, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for coming out. Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. The Director's Cut is available wherever you listen to podcasts. And please share, subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow film buffs find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America.